Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, dynamic, and absolutely vital subject, the global youth ecosystem. We're going to unpack the realities of a generation that is currently navigating overlapping global crises, yet is still brimming with unprecedented potential. Whether you're a corporate leader, a policymaker, or just an active member of your community, figuring out how to structurally support young people is, without a doubt, one of the most critical missions of our time. To really wrap our heads around the scale of what we're discussing today, let's look at this number, 1.2 billion. According to the United Nations, that is the number of young people between the ages of 15 and 24 on the planet right now. That's roughly 16% of the entire world's population. Now, whether a young person is a software developer in Bangalore, a vocational student in Nairobi, or a high school grad in Chicago, obviously they live in vastly different national and economic realities. But, as the UN's recent International Youth Day theme so perfectly captured, different contexts, common aspirations. They all share the exact same core desires for dignity, decent work, a quality education, and meaningful participation in society. And that brings us to a quote that really flips the script on how we usually talk about this. Anne Franca, the chief executive of the Chartered Management Institute, challenges us with this. We've spent years asking whether young people are ready for work. It's time we started asking whether work is ready for young people. We are so quick to blame youth for not seamlessly fitting into traditional systems. But what if the systems themselves, our workplaces, our civic institutions, our healthcare models, what if they're fundamentally outdated? It is really time we ask how society must structurally adapt to support this generation, rather than just demanding they mold to us. So how do we unpack all this? Well, here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the Global Youth Challenge, move into bridging the skills gap, then amplifying digital civic voices, transforming youth mental health, and finally, we'll tie it all together in a unified path forward. All right, let's jump straight into part one, the Global Youth Challenge and those narrowing pathways. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that young people aren't lacking ambition. The reality is that these structural pathways into economic opportunity are narrowing. The International Labor Organization estimates global youth unemployment sits around 13%. To put that into perspective, that means young people are more than 3 times as likely to be unemployed compared to adults. Looking at recent U.S. data, youth unemployment was at nearly 11% compared to an overall rate of just 4.3%. With entry-level job postings dropping rapidly, partly because of AI adoption and a generally slower hiring market, that transition from education to employment, it's getting incredibly tight. Which leads us to a pretty staggering figure. Right now, 260 million young people worldwide are classified as NEET. That stands for not in education, employment, or training. The World Economic Forum actually notes that the vast majority of young people cite financial strain and job creation as their top personal anxieties. So what we're looking at is a really heavy baseline of stress before a young person even sets foot in an office or a voting booth. Okay, moving on to section 2, let's talk about bridging the skills gap and corporate readiness. We've got a massive disconnect happening right now. A landmark report from the Chartered Management Institute found that while 45% of 18 to 24-year-olds genuinely believe they are equipped with the skills to succeed, just 6% of managers agree. Just 6%. That is a huge workplace readiness gap. But here's the catch. By 2034, millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha are going to make up 80% of the global labor market. So companies absolutely must step up and actively help close this gap through mentorship, structured onboarding, and skills-based volunteering. So how do companies actually do this in practice? Well, the volunteering platform Goodera provides a really effective, simple 3-step activation framework. First up, choose your orientation. Are you investing internally in your young employees, say through reverse mentoring, or externally by directing your team's skills to youth-serving nonprofits? Second, define your commitment level. We need to move past surface-level LinkedIn posts and actually commit to structural, skills-based volunteering. And third, connect to year-round programs. The most durable, real impact happens when companies treat youth development as a continuous, year-round commitment, not just a one-off ceremonial event. To make this super concrete, let's look at some major organizations who are doing this right. Deloitte, for example, embeds youth leadership right into its long-term ESG strategy through its partnership with One Young World, where they fund social innovators and provide multi-year mentorship. Microsoft South Africa launched this incredible initiative to equip 1 million young people with globally recognized AI certifications, which creates direct pipelines into actual employment. And TechnoServe partners with corporations to provide hands-on business training, seeing amazing returns where youth income dramatically increases. The takeaway here? These are systemic, long-term investments. Okay, so we know they want to work and contribute economically. But how are young people claiming agency and making their voices heard in society when they log off from their jobs? Which brings us to Section 3, Digital Civic Voices and Reimagining the Political Space. When you and I think of civic engagement, we probably think of voting or showing up to a town hall. But fascinating research from UNICEF shows us that young people around the world have completely redefined what civic engagement looks like. Using highly accessible digital media tools, youth are developing their civic identities and expressing their political stances in incredibly creative ways. We're talking videos, memes, and digital artwork. They're claiming real agency in online affinity networks, creating spaces for themselves that just aren't afforded to them in traditional adult-dominated civic arenas. They are quite literally reimagining the entire concept of the political. So if we want to empower this kind of early sociopolitical engagement, our policymakers and organizations have to adapt. UNICEF lays out some very actionable precepts for this. We must take into account blended contexts, understanding that these affinity networks are primary valid spaces for youth. We have to appreciate their varied content. Yes, a meme can absolutely be a valid political statement. We need to actively promote digital literacies and civic education at an early age. And, crucially, we have to do all of this safely, mitigating the very real risks of the online world. It's clear that the digital world offers incredible civic empowerment, but it also comes with a heavy cost. How do we support their minds amidst the crushing pressures of stagnant living standards, the modern workforce, and those online harms we just mentioned? Let's get into Section 4, Youth Mental Health and Addressing this Crisis. The Center for Mental Health reports something incredibly concerning. Around 1 in 5 young people aged 8 to 25 report a diagnosable common mental health problem, things like anxiety or depression. And alarmingly, young women aged 17 to 25 are now experiencing twice the rates of these problems as young men. And what happens when they actually build up the courage to seek help? Well, they meet a specialist care system that is fundamentally overwhelmed by late-stage demand. This results in agonizingly long waits or young people being turned away entirely simply because early support wasn't there when they first needed it. So what is the actual fix here? It looks a lot like this: the Future Minds Neighborhood Blueprint. It represents a vital structural shift away from relying solely on hospital-centric crisis care and moves us toward proactive, community-based early intervention. As you can see, the foundations begin with the basics: safe homes, financial security, and a sense of belonging. From there, it scales up to accessible community hubs, youth work, and social prescribing. We desperately need things like young futures hubs in every community, integrating therapeutic support, employment advice, and family support under one roof, long before a crisis ever hits. To get there, the Center for Mental Health outlines 3 core strategic shifts we need to make by 2035. First, from hospital to community, shifting our financial investment towards earlier, localized support. Second, from analog to digital, safely harnessing need-driven digital tools and purpose-built AI. This widens access and reduces wait times while beautifully complementing traditional human care. And third, from sickness to prevention, adopting a population-wide mental health approach that embeds well-being directly into schools and youth settings right from the start. Bringing it all together in Section 5, a unified path forward for work, voice, and mind. If there is one thing you take away from this explainer, let it be this: work, voice, and mind are not separate silos. They are one cohesive, interconnected ecosystem. You absolutely cannot have a ready, highly skilled corporate workforce if that generation is suffering from an unaddressed mental health crisis. And you cannot expect safe, constructive digital civic engagement if those exact same young people are locked out of economic opportunity and drowning in financial anxiety. Society must structurally adapt across all 3 of these dimensions to truly empower this generation. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. With 1.2 billion young people out there looking to shape the future, inaction is simply no longer an option. So ask yourself, take a hard look at your workplace, your local policies, your community. Are you currently a roadblock holding on to outdated systems? Or are you actively serving as a launchpad for the next generation? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some immediate structural changes in how you engage with the youth in your world. See you next time.